Well, welcome back to Modeling Time with me, Brian Banna. Fresh off getting the SD45 side frames built, take a slight break, work on something else. I don't like working on the same thing day after day after day. I get bored with it, so I need to switch things up a bit, and I have a lot of other projects going on. So for this one, I've got a yellow box Atlas C425, uses the same frame as C424, and this is the frame for it. And you'll notice there are no coupler pads here, so you're pulling off the pilot. Well, I designed a way to build a draft gearbox around that and pull off the frame. So let me get the camera set up and we'll go over that. And I think it's pretty cool. All right, so I did the design, 3D design, and I had it printed at Shapeways. I don't mind using Shapeways on my things because a lot of the stuff that I do you can't see. They're for the internal parts of the locomotive and stuff. But anyway, let me go over it. So, there, I showed you the frame before. There's no coupler pads in. I've got one end of the frame already done. So what you need to do first is we need to, where's me a pointer? I'll use this here. We need to cut these off here. Cut these off. Cut this pin pad off, but leave the little pad, the rectangular pad underneath it there. So I'm going to cut this off, cut this off, cut this off. Now you'll notice on the inside here there's a little bit of an angled piece right here and right here. Well, I've made accommodations for that in my design. So let me go ahead and get these cut off, and I'll show you what it needs to look like underneath. But before I do that, let me show you the design. So this is the first part of the design. This is what I call the coupler pad. Let me zoom in on this. So this is the part that fits up behind the pilot plate. Now you'll see that there are little circular cutouts here and here, and this one right here, a little rectangular cutout. That is because you've got this pin and this pin, so that's the circular cutouts, and then you've got this pad right here, for that's the rectangular cutout. Now on the other end you don't have this pad, so I just made it with that cutout so I don't have to make two of them. Now what it does is you glue that right up inside there. Now you see a little bit of silver on the inside there. Well, I made accommodations right here for a 080 nut to fit in there. And what I have to do is I have to grind off this portion of it. So I'll mark it and grind that portion off, and then I'll CA that into this part, and then when it goes into the sill unit, that pad right there will lock that nut in place. I'll also drill a hole through that pad, and we'll go over all of that for a screw clearance and such. So then what happens, let me see, where is it at? Just use this piece, right? Nope, not that one. Where'd it go? Where did it go? Oh, here it is right in front of me. Okay, so then this is the main draft gearbox. Okay, I don't know what a real C425, C424 draft gearbox looks like, so I just made a box. You'll see. I know it's rectangular underneath there, but I've never been up close to one, so I couldn't take pictures of it or anything like that. So this is the box, and what that does is, where's that piece? Okay, if you look real close here, you'll see a hole right there. There's a blind hole there and a blind hole there. Now, in my initial design, I have these little, where's it at? These little 20 thousandths pins that stick up. I redesigned that And after putting this in, I had to make a couple of design changes, and I've already done that. So I've redesigned that pin to be 40 thousandths diameter and 40 thousandths long. And then in this and then in this part, the holes are 45 thousandths diameter and 45 thousandths deep, and they're moved out just a little bit more, so they're not so close to the opening where the bolt go or the nut goes in, and the clearance area is and all that stuff. So I take care of that. So then I've got holes that are countersunk for 080 screw. It's a through hole for a 080 screw. So, and then what I do, see, the pins broke off on this one, so I just replaced them with 20 thousandths brass pins or phosphor bronze pins. Now what happens is that those go right into the hole, those holes right there, so it'll be like that. But what's really cool, but once you put the frame, in there, then you lock that in place. You mark the frame for where you need to drill and tap it. So I've drilled and tapped this hole. So that goes in like that. Then I got screws that'll go through there. And then the last piece is the draft gearbox for the coupler, and that is, where did I put that? Oh, here it is. So this is the draft gearbox for the coupler. Let me see if I can get this apart. There we go. There we go. So this is the draft gearbox for the coupler. So you got the main body, and then you got the lid that's tabbed, and it fits right over that. So here's the coupler. The lid goes up, so that's the coupler's up. Get this lid on there. The lid goes on. Oop, got the little whisker stuck. There we go. So the lid goes on there like that, and then that just fits right through the opening. Push it in there to the back, and now all the holes line up, and then you just put a panhead screw. If I can see, you put that in and you just screw it in place. The coupler lines up perfectly. Whoops, sorry. The coupler lines up perfectly with the KD coupler height gauge. So that's basically it. So let's put this thing together, and I'll show you the steps that it takes. So the first thing we need to do, or the first thing I need to do, is I'm going to cut this out. That's pretty easy. Just take some nippers, start nipping it. Now after I get this nipped, I'm going to have to just go off camera and clean it up, but I'll explain what I'll do in a minute. So there's that one. Just go in there and aggressively rip these things out. Like that. Take this thing out. And it looks pretty ugly, I know, but it won't. Once it's all cleaned up, I really need to put my optivisors on. Okay, so that's just rough cleaning it up. Now what I'll do is I'll take a sharp chisel blade, and now I'll start cutting that down, cutting that down, cutting that, cutting that, and cutting this in the middle here. So I'm sorry, cutting that down, that, and this. And just cleaning it up even with the inside face of the pilot and the underside of the deck. So let me go get that taken care of, and we'll come back and see what it looks like. All right, so I have the inside cut out. Remember, this is what it looked like. And this is what it looks like now. Now, it doesn't have to look pretty. All that's going to be hidden in there once all the parts are in there. But the most important part, or the most important thing to remember, is that when you take the parts off or the molded on pieces in here, that you need to be flush with the inside of the pilot plate and flush with the surface of the underside of the deck. And this portion here, when you take this little pin, circular pin hole off, is to make it flush with the top of that piece there. And that's all it takes. Took me about 10 minutes to do that. And so we'll take this part and the angle. See, I remember I said there's an angle. Where do I put my pointer all the time? There we go. There's an angle here and over here. Well, on this part, I made an angle, as you can see right there at the base, and that will just make clearance for that angle. And get this thing to fit on. There we go. Like that. So it fits down in there real nicely. So now if we put this frame in here, this part should just drop right in there like that. And that part will be glued to the inside here. So the next thing to do is, since we have this part in here, this is a 60 thousandths hole. Let me just a second. Let me get my drill bit all set up. Show you what I'm doing next. This is a 58 thousandths drill bit. That's a clearance hole for a 080. I made this hole 60 thousandths. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down in the center here and just press it, give it a little bit of a turn, and that's going to make a mark right there where I need to drill. So that's easy. We're just going to come in here and we're going to drill this hole. This piece is hollow inside, so you only have to drill a little bit and it goes right in there. So that takes care of that. And when I put this piece back on, that hole lines up. You're not going to see it, but it lines up perfectly. So the next thing we need to do is, let me see if I can get this stay on camera here, is we need to mark this nut for where I need to grind it to. There's nothing to show about grinding. I'm just using a Dremel cutoff wheel and I'm going to just grind the back of the nut down. But what I'll do here is I'll mark approximately how much of the nut I need to take off. So let me go get that taken care of and we'll come back and glue that in. All right, so after grinding it, it fits in nicely and is pretty much even with the back. As long as it doesn't stick out the back, you're fine, because you don't want it interfering with the frame. So now I'll just go ahead and glue that in. Now, when I cut the inside of this out, I also took the liberty to grit blast all these parts and put bronze or phosphor bronze pins in those holes, because eventually those pins that were built onto the part would break off. So let me get some glue in here. There we go. Now it's important that you don't let glue ooze out into the opening of that where the threads are. And now I'll put some glue just around the, fill in around the gaps. There we go. And now that's all glued in. Now I can go ahead and I can glue this part into here, which will be fairly easy. So I'll just hold that like that. Got a big blob of glue out here. Put some on the bottom. Put some on the front. Now we'll just lay that part right in there. And I'll get some glue into where the, whoops, not there. Cut that off later. Into where the pins are. There we go. Let me get this glue off of here. Doesn't really matter. It's not going to cause any problems. Okay, so that part's glued in. Let me just press it up against the front there. There we go. Nice. All right. So that takes care of that part. Now, if we zoom back out, our frame should fit right in there. So and let's make sure it's nothing's bowing out. There we go. Don't want any tension. What I might do is come back and take just a little bit off of this edge and a little bit off of this edge, and then for the design take probably 10 thousandths off the back of this piece so that both pieces will have more than enough clearance when so that when the frame drops in there's no binding on the end, because if there's any binding on the ends, it's going to push your step wells out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take off about 5 thousandths off of this edge and 5 thousandths off of this edge, and on the design I'll take 10 thousandths off the back. If there's a small gap, that's okay. What we don't want is we don't want the frame spreading these step wells. So I'll go ahead and get that done and we'll be right back. Well, that did the trick. I took 5 thousandths off the end of each end of the, I'm sorry, I took 5 thousandths off each end of the frame, and now it just drops right in without any problems at all, and it's still up pretty tight against the blocks. So what is the next step? That would be to get these holes on this side. And the way we do that is we got this part here. Let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. So we got this part here, we got the locating holes, and we got the pins. So we're going to just put those pins into the locating holes, and that puts that right there. And then we're going to take our 50 thousandths drill bit, and we're going to just mark the frame. So put that there. All I need to do, I gotta make sure that it's here. Let me put the shell on, and that'll lock the frame in place. See what's the top? There we go.
Make sure I got everything in there right. There we go. There we go. Okay, now the frame is locked in place. The deck is locked in place. Put this in the locating holes there. Just like that. Whoop. My finger stuck to it. Pulled it out. Okay, so we got that there. Now, I'm going to just take the drill bit, go down through the holes, and give it a couple of turns. Give it a couple of turns. And what that's going to do, it's going to put 2 silver marks where I need to start my holes. So now I will take the shell off, take the deck off. And I will move some stuff here. There we go. Take a, where's my, there we go. Take a little pin that I've created. And I'm going to just go on center of those because these are nice small little marks. I'm just going to put a little dimple there. Put a little dimple there. Now I'm going to move it over to the edge of my workplace here. Let me turn this. There we go. So that I can press hard on this and not. Let me move this. Whoops, sorry about this, guys. There we go. So now I can press down on this and I won't bend the frame. There's that one. There, so I got some nice starting holes. All right, so the next step is to drill the holes and then tap them for the screws that'll hold the main draft gearbox, this piece, in place. So what I do there is I use 3 drill bits. I use the smaller than the final size, of course. Then I use a drill bit that's about halfway between this one and the final size for a 080 screw. And the drill for a 080 screw is 0.046. So these first 2 will be in the 30 thousandths, and then so I think this one's 35, I think this one's 30, 39, and then 046. I always use oil when I cut because these frames are soft and they will gum up a drill bit. So let me go. Now the way that I make sure that I'm on center of these starting holes that I have is I put the drill bit in, of course, and then I lower it down and I bring it to the dimple, and when it stops deflecting from one side to the other in both the horizontal axis or the x-axis and in the z-axis, then I know for me it's centered, and that's what I've done here already. Whoop. Looks like some of it gummed up in there, even with oil. There we go. There we go. I don't just power through it. That's a sure way of galling the bit. There we go. That one went through, and now we'll put the next size in. There's that one. And now we'll put the final size in. Sometimes it's hard to get this thing centered in the chuck, but there we go. And that's it. So I'll go ahead and get this one done, and then we'll go tap it. All right, so I've got the holes drilled, and now it's time to tap them. But before I tap them, I use a countersink tool, and I just clean off any burrs that happened during the drilling process. There we go. Now, this is a 080 tap. I'm going to put just a little bit of oil on the end. This oil is just standard motor oil. I mean, you can get tap oil and all that stuff, but I have that. Now, you don't need to put a lot of pressure on it, just enough to get it started. Once the threads are started, then you just let the tool do the work. And you always want to do quarter turn brake with a back turn. So there's it started. I clean these chips off of here. So you do a quarter turn back, quarter turn back, quarter turn back, quarter turn back, and you just keep doing that until you get through. Let me back out and get these chips out. And we're all the way through. Now I'm gonna get the chips off here so I don't deposit them back into the threads, and that's it. So I'll go ahead and get this other hole done, but one other thing, again, with the countersink tool, just clean off the area that gets pushed out, and that's basically tapping that hole. So I'll go ahead and get this one done, and we'll move on to the next step. So now I've got both of the holes tapped, and before I do any painting on this frame, I'm going to thoroughly wash this frame in hot soapy water to get all the oils off and such. So now it's time to test fit everything up. So frame drops in here. I'm going to put the shell on. There we go. Let me get my pad out here. Now, I've got my screws all set and ready. Let me see this one. So this one will drop
Make sure I'm on camera here.
Sorry guys. So this one drops right in there, and I need to make sure. There we go. Let me see if this works. So this should fit. That's what I thought. Yep. See, on this end, I trimmed the height of this pad down about 5 thousandths. On this end, I didn't, which I need to probably do, which I can do, and this coupler box will fit in perfectly. So it's just a little high on there. I think it's a little high on the front edge. So let me go ahead and correct that. I'm going to change that on the design. I'll take 5 thousandths off the height of this, and everything should work out just fine. So I'll be right back. Now I understand why I was having problems getting these draft gearboxes to fit up nice against the pilot plate, the back of the pilot plate. It turns out that the surface or the underside of the deck is not flat. When I looked at this assembly, looking down through this way, the back of this block was even with the frame. The front of the block that's up against the inside of the pilot was lower, so it was at an angle. So that's why nothing was fitting properly. But because of the way that how much room it's back here, I was able to clamp this in the mill, put some parallels under the deck, and just take my bit down till it just barely skimmed the surface on the back end here, and then just moved it forward and cut it flat. So now it's flat all the way across. I was like, I can't figure out why these things aren't fitting properly in, and that's why I was having the binding on the frame and all that, but still everything works out great. Now I would sell these as a kit, but nobody's going to buy them because the kit that I put together is enough for 2 locomotives. That costs as much as 1 yellow box locomotive. So they're expensive, and I don't think people want to put that much money into it, so these aren't going to go up for sale. I mean, even if I did 1 kit, it would probably be about half of what a yellow box costs. So now, getting back to this should fit real nicely, just like that. Get this stuff out of the hole. There we go. Should fit real nicely. Where's the holes at? There we go. There we go. And I can now take these screws. These should all be, yeah, they're all the same length here. So I can put that one in there, that one in there, so that's in there now. And you can still take the frame out. Well, you should be able to take the frame out. I think it locked those pins really tight into the holes. But on the front one, when I just had the front one on there, it came out. So, and now this, let me make sure that that should work now. This, my coupler draft gearbox, should just slide right in like that. Hole lines up. And there it is. So what I did for that is I made it so that the coupler is pulled in a little bit closer, because a lot of times these couplers stick way out far. So I got it as close as I could possibly get to scale, where the pulling face of the coupler is 25 inches off the pilot plate, but it's a little bit further, not by much, but it still has a good full swing. So now we can do the front. Should go in the same way, like that. Oops, sorry, I keep getting off screen when I'm zoomed in. There's that. There's that. Where's the coupler? There we go. And there's that. Whoop, a little too tight. There we go. All right, so now we got the couplers in. And because of the way this is designed, we're now not flexing the pilot plate, we're pulling off the frame here. So that's a good, nice setup. And plus, it'll give you something filled in back there when you put all this together. There won't be a bunch of light behind there. You'll have something that represents a draft gearbox. But now let's see what happens with the coupler height gauge. All right, so we've got the Kato coupler height gauge. And let's move this in. Looks pretty much dead on for me. Let's check the front out. And it looks pretty good there too. So I think I've got it set up pretty nicely. Now the front one looks slightly high. It might be like 5 thousandths high, but I don't care. I'm happy with that. So let's see what it looks like when it couples up to a freight car, because I find that these Kato coupler gauges, even though they are supposed to gauge, you know, your coupler height to Kato stuff, they don't. I've found that like some Athearn cars, the couplers aren't the same. I've found Walther's cars that they're not the same. So let's see what this car that I'm testing right now is dead on. So this one should be good. I'm happy with that. Let's check the back. That looks good. So I'm really, really happy with the results of this design, and I'll be applying it to all my C424s and C425s. I've also done the design for the Atlas RS11 yellow box as well. I'm just waiting for that one to come in. It should work out the same way. Most of the parts are pretty much the same. It's just that it's slightly different on the inside of the pilot plate. And so the frame pad, or the coupler pad, what I call, is just a little bit different. But the box, or the draft gear boxes, are all the same. So there you have it. A design that I think is both useful and ornamental. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I will be using that on all my C424, 425s. I like the yellow box versions. I have enough of the newer Atlas shells. I have 10 of the C425 and 6 of the C424s that have the individual grab irons and things like that, but I'll be putting those shells on yellow box locomotives because I like the Kato drive. I think the Kato drive is superior than the Atlas clone drive. So that's what I'll be doing, and I'll be using this setup for that. So again, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you stayed with me through the whole video, thank you very much.